Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Xiaolin Perspectives, and today we're going to be discussing episode 42 of Xiaolin Showdown, The Life and Times of Hannibal Roy Bean. And this episode begins with the Xiaolin monks, duking it out with the sweet baby among us. Why? Just mostly sparring. Of course, the sparring gets put on hold as a new Shengang Wu reveals itself. A pair of braces called the Moby Morpher, which, as the name of the Shengang Wu implies, allows whoever utilizes it to literally be a shapeshifter. With the Moby Morpher, you can transform into anything, anyone, gaining full powers and abilities, basically become a perfect copy of that person as long as you can think of them. Basically, it's one of the most powerful Shengang Wu, no shit. As such, as you do, the Xiaolin monks go to, find the Shengang Wu, and as you do, they end up running into resistance, as the Moby Morpher is located in the middle of a volcano, and they end up crossing paths with Wuya and Chase Young. Well, Wuya more than Chase Young. Chase is only really there because, he and Wuya are evil partners, so he's pretty much just there for moral support, but otherwise he does not really give a shit what happens here, so it's just Wuya's show all the way around. As such, the Xiaolin monks duke it out with Wuya. She kind of whoops their asses, while at one point we're kind of gesturing to her butt because someone said they were going to kick it. I swear to God, with Wuya. But eventually the Moby Morpher is found, and just as Wuya tries to make a grab for it, so does Kimiko, and so Kimiko challenges Wuya to a Xiaolin showdown. The challenge in this case being meteor shower. Basically, the two of them are going to be in a field that's being bombarded with meteors, and in the center of the field is going to be the Moby Morpher. Whoever can reach the Moby Morpher first will be the winner, and Wuya, to try and add a little bit of zest to it, ends up wagering the Yin Yo-Yo against Kimiko's Yang Yo-Yo. I thought that Wuya had the Yang Yo-Yo, not the other way around, but whatever, semantics. Either way, Xiaolin Showdown is declared, and again, pretty damn cool. Lava literally gets burst right into the air. It's basically in space. It forms like a giant rock arena. In the center of it is the Moby Morpher, and again, they got meteorites raining down on them. And of course, because Kimiko and Wuya are wielding the yin and yang yo-yos, to try and get away from the meteors, they keep jumping in and out of the yin-yang world, resulting in the pair of them having their switches flipped from good to evil and vice versa. And that's admittedly kind of funny. This is also the one time that we see Kimiko as evil, and it's honestly kind of amusing. It's literally just that she decides that she wants to do world domination and her eyes turn red. It's funny. But basically, like I said, Wuya and Kimiko basically have their switches flipped from good to evil throughout the battle, until eventually they do manage to jump through enough portals that they do get everything back to normal, and after Kimiko managed to trick Wuya into going into the yin-yang world, while she's good, it allows Kimiko enough time to grab at the Moby Morpher and thus win the showdown, winning both the Moby Morpher and the Yin Yo-Yo, thus ensuring that the Xiaolin monks have both yo-yos again. Unfortunately, they don't really have time to savor their victory, as, guess what? Jack Spicer arrives on the scene. And remember last episode when he got the fake bird of paradise, which turned out to just be a regular peacock, or not peacock, hold on one second. Sorry, I was blanking on the word. Jack and his parrot arrive. Yeah, the parrot that he thought was the bird of paradise is still around. Jack decided to keep it, and he even started calling it Lil Jack. And Lil Jack actually does manage to get us a good victory for the evil Mr. Spicer, as it swoops in and actually steals a good chunk of the Shengang Wu from both the Xiaolin monks and Wuya, as apparently she had the reversing mirror on her. Which makes me wonder if having that on her is why she was turning good. I don't know. I'm just gonna stop trying to figure out the yin-yang world. It's hard to wrap my head around, so whatever. Point is, Jack seems to have gotten a victory, because, hey, he got all the Shengang Wu, and hell, the bird even managed to grab the Moby Morpher, the Shengang Wu they all came here for, so, hey, it looks like everything's going good, but when Lil Jack is supposed to return the Shengang Wu to Jack, well, he kind of gets a little stingy. While he returns most of them, he does end up... okay, actually, he doesn't really... Okay, I don't know if he returns most of them. I saw Jack with the Vista Tebi gone, so it looked like he had them, so maybe the bird gave him the Jack and then took him back? I don't know. Point is, I think it at least kept the Moby Morpher and ends up flying away. Of course, Jack chases after the bird because, he wants his shit, but just as he catches up to Lil Jack suddenly changes as he transforms from a parakeet into a different kind of bird. Like, originally this bird had, green feathers, a red beak, and all that, but now its feathers change to black with red outlines and so forth, and upon transforming, Jack and the bird are encompassed by the yin-yang symbol, and they vanish, seemingly going into the yin-yang world. Much to everyone's confusion, save Chase Young, who apparently recognizes what Lil Jack really was. Apparently, he was this mystical bird called the Yin Yang bird, and the fact that this bird is around means that a certain someone is going about and is getting ready to strike. Someone by the name of Hannibal Bean. However, before we end up learning too much about that, we cut to later as the Xiaolin monks return to the temple, and Master Feng basically just wants them on a rescue mission, as he has them all pile into the Silver Manta Ray and use the Yin and Yang yo-yos to basically go into the Yin Yang world and see if they can get their Shen Gong Wu back. As such, the Shaolin monks end up doing this with Dojo coming along too, since, well, Dojo. But the thing is, back in the Yin Yang world, we cut back to Jack as he's still chasing after the Yin Yang bird just to get his Shen Gong Wu back. Of course, it's still a very trippy journey since he's going through the Yin Yang world, but as he chases the bird, eventually the trail leads the evil boy genius to what looks like a prison. And I don't mean like it's like a doorway or something. No, it's like a full-blown prison located in the Yin Yang world. Like large brick walls, a steel gate. There's a sign on the front that says, "Do not feed the prisoners." There are searchlights about in case of escaped convicts or whatever. Point is, it's an actual honest-to-goodness prison, and, well, the Yin Yang bird went in there, so Jack kind of wants to go in to get his shit back. However, before he can even set foot in there, who should he run into but good Jack? Yeah, remember the last time Jack went to the Yin Yang world and he used the Ring of the Nine Dragons to split himself in two? Well, here's the good copy again, and he's still a good guy. I'm guessing he's managed to stay alive because, you know, the Yin Yang world kind of treats physics like they're suggestions, so I could very easily see good Jack finding ways to stay alive and evade the Chi Beast. Point is, though, good Jack is happy to see his evil counterpart, but he advises evil Jack not to go into the prison, because apparently the prison is home to, well, this Hannibal Bean that Chase mentioned. And when Jack hears that name, he recognizes it immediately, as apparently in the world of evil, this guy, full name Hannibal Roy Bean, is a big deal, with Jack saying that he's one of his personal heroes, with even evil Jack kind of pointing out the hypocrisy of that statement, since apparently Chase Young was his evil hero, but Jack just writes it off saying, "Oh, no, I can have two evil heroes." As such, despite his good half's warnings, Jack just kind of waltzes inside, and eventually he does end up getting to the heart of the Escher-style prison, and I do mean Escher-style. It kind of obeys the same laws of physics as the rest of the Yin Yang world, but he eventually does find where Hannibal Roy Bean is kept. And I will admit, initial first impressions of this character are actually strong, as the very first thing we see of him is just this big circular screen with robotic legs attached to it, and just a pair of red glowing eyes looking down at Jack. And we immediately hear Hannibal Roy Bean, and the voice that they give is a honestly nice juxtaposition of this image, as rather than it sounding dark and sinister, he instead has a bit of a southern drawl, kind of like a southern gentleman like type. And the way he talks to Jack is actually pretty polite, in all things considered. Kind of similar to Chase, but whereas Chase does have, like, sinister undertones, this guy kind of sounds a little jovial, actually friendly. Like the kind of guy who would welcome you into his home and then serve you a big meal just to get some food in you. It's actually kind of nice, but I think that the juxtaposition of the voice combined with the imagery does actually work for the most part. And the thing is, Hannibal knows who Jack Spicer is. He's heard of him. He knows everything about him. And while he's honored to be one of Jack's personal evil heroes, he thinks that Jack is one generation away from being a good guy, mostly because he has some weaknesses that he has yet to overcome. Namely, that he's afraid of clowns, he can't sleep without a nightlight, and he cries like a little girl every time he's away from his mother for more than a day, which that's kind of sad, but whatever. Point is, Jack says that he does want to be evil, and Hannibal says that there is a way he could, but it requires Jack to do something for Hannibal. As such, Jack kind of goes past the screen, which moves aside, and we do seem to see Hannibal in all his glory, as we see what looks like this giant demonic knight sitting in the middle of a glass cage, all just looking decked out, threatening, evil, and so forth. We even see the little red eyes, and just as Jack goes up to it, this knight just stands up, opens its mouth, and its hands suddenly erupt in blue flame. But rather than blasting at the wall, the knight spits something out that just smacks against the wall, and when Jack goes to see what this thing is, he sees a bean. A bean that grows little vestigial arms and ends up getting a pair of eyes and a mouthful of crooked teeth. And this, my friends, is the real Hannibal Roy Bean. And yeah, the name ain't an exaggeration. He's a literal talking bean. Kind of evil doing, everybody. But yeah, Hannibal basically just wants Jack to let him out. He's trying now to try and give Jack some incentive. He reveals that the Yin Yang bird brought him all the Shen Gong Wu. So if Jack wants them back, all he has to do is let Hannibal out. However, of course, Jack is being Jack, and he's just being a little hesitant, which does start pissing Hannibal off something fierce, because he wants out of this cage. Unfortunately, we don't really see how this exchange goes down, as we cut back to the Xiaolin monks as they enter the Yin Yang world. And the thing is, they were told before going into the Yin Yang world to be careful, as in the Yin Yang world, Shen Gong Wu tend to be unpredictable. Sometimes they'll work the way you want them to, other times they'll do their own thing. And unfortunately, such an event occurs with the Silver Manta Ray as it's flying around, and unfortunately the Xiaolin monks start losing control. Losing even more control when Dojo demands to be handed the wheel, and when he does, they literally start falling backwards. Whatever. Thankfully, they're saved by Omi using the golden finger to freeze time for the Silver Manta Ray, which allows everyone to get out of it before it crashes. But the point is, they still gotta find the Yin Yang bird and their Shen Gong Wu. As such, Raimundo volunteers Clay to stay behind and guard the Silver Manta Ray, as well as repair it, since he's good with tractors, which even Clay calls a bit of a stereotype. But the point is, the remaining Xiaolin monks go out into the Yin Yang world to try and find Jack, and along the way, they end up running into Good Jack, who does let them know exactly what happened. As well, they end up meeting him outside the prison, outside of Hannibal's prison, and Good Jack talks about how he ran into his evil counterpart and how he warned him to not go into said prison because, well, Hannibal Roy Bean is in there. And the instant Dojo hears that name, he immediately starts freaking the hell out and actually starts explaining more about Hannibal's backstory. And it turns out Hannibal was the one who corrupted Chase Young. You see, apparently, over 1,600 years ago, give or take, Chase Young and Master Monk Guan were friends. News to me, but we'll get to that later. However, despite the fact that Chase Young was a good guy, like Will before, he wanted to be the best. He wanted to be the strongest fighter, and obviously being compared to Master Monk Guan didn't exactly help that. And that's when Hannibal came in, as basically Hannibal acted as the little devil on Chase's shoulder, quite literally in this case, and basically just told Chase Young that if he wanted to be the strongest, then he would need to basically give up his soul and throw his lot in for the Halen side. And that's when he tempted Chase with a Lao Ming Lo soup, and Chase, in his own weakness, basically took the soup, and, well, it turned him into the monster we know today. Quite literally, as the first thing he did was become that lizard creature. He, of course, caused mass destruction, mass panic, and basically he basically became the douche nozzle we know today. But now that Chase was evil, he started wondering why the hell is he working for this tiny little bean, and so, as a bit of a screw you to Hannibal, he basically imprisoned him in the Yin Yang world, intending for it to be basically a forever punishment. And as such, Dojo pretty much says that they gotta find Jack before he lets Hannibal out. As such, the Xiaolin monks and Good Jack end up working together as they go inside the prison, and they do manage to make it to the center of the prison where Hannibal's cell is. Only Hannibal ain't in the cell, it's Jack Spicer, who claims that he did let Hannibal out, but then Hannibal, as a kind of final screw you, wound up trapping him inside in his place. As such, he begs the Xiaolin monks to let him out because he just wants to go home, and the Xiaolin monks, feeling sorry for this guy, do oblige. As such, they all end up leaving the prison because, well, Hannibal's out there, gotta find him. But they don't go that far when they run into Jack. Yeah, that's a bit weird, ain't it? There are two Jack Spicers, and no, I'm not referring to Good Jack. No, there are two evil Jack Spicers, and both of them claim that the other is Hannibal, just looking like Jack using the Moby Morpher. Of course, the Xiaolin monks have no idea of which one is the real Jack, but thankfully they do have a shortcut to finding out, because you see, they do still have the Ring of the Nine Dragons, and since Jack split himself in half from his good side with the ring, maybe they can use the ring to fuse them back together. And so, sure enough, they activate the Ring of the Nine Dragons, and it does end up merging to the good Jack with one of the evil Jacks, and the evil Jack that he's merged back together with is the one that the group ran into, meaning that the one that the group let out of the cell was Hannibal Roy Bean. And yeah, basically he just played them. Using the Moby Morpher, he was able to transform into Jack, and, well, he obviously knows a lot about Jack, so he was able to mimic him perfectly, and, well, let's just say that the Xiaolin monks have egg on their face because they just let out a very bad guy. As such, he reverts back to his original form and just mocks the Xiaolin monks for letting him out, and so they try and fight Hannibal because, well, he's a being, they're Wudai warriors, they think they can beat him, but apparently he can just easily knock aside their attacks, even though he's a literal fucking bean, but what do I care? And to try and even further confuse them, he used the Mobi Morpher to shapeshift into the Xiaolin monks themselves. First shapeshifting into Omi and getting into a group tussle, only to slip out of that tussle, shapeshift into Dojo, and thus trick the Xiaolin monks into attacking the real Dojo. As such, once everything is said and done, he reverts back to his bean form and runs away. As such, the Xiaolin monks realize that if they can't fight Hannibal, then maybe the best guess is just, or maybe their best bet is just to run for it. After all, he's still in the yin-yang world, and without the yin-yang yo-yo, it's not like he could just come and go as he pleases. As such, the Xiaolin monks and Jack manage to make their way back to the Silver Manta Ray, which Clay has managed to thankfully put back together. All six of them end up getting into the Silver Manta Ray and end up fleeing the Yin Yang world, hoping that they trapped Hannibal inside. However, upon them returning back to the real world and returning back to the Xiaolin Temple, who do they run into but Chase Young? Excuse me one second. Sorry, Chindy came in. But yeah, Chase Young is literally at the entrance to the temple, and he says that he's here to kind of finish up some old business. And as such, he ends up looking to each of the Xiaolin monks before he gets his eyes on Clay and attacks him, knocking him down the stairs of the temple before jumping in front of him and preparing to deliver a coup de grace with a staff. Of course, the Xiaolin monks rush to Clay's aid and try fending off Chase Young, only for Clay to back away, smile sinisterly, and pull out the Mobi Morpher. Yep, this was Hannibal Bean. Basically, while he got out of eyesight, he managed to beat the other Xiaolin monks to the Silver Manta Ray, and after he knocked Clay out, he took his place and, well, the Xiaolin monks basically just helped him escape from the yin-yang world, which he appreciates and thanks them for, before he climbs on top of the yin-yang bird and then just makes a run for it. And as a result, while the Xiaolin monks do end up finding Clay just stashed away in some empty cockpit in the Silver Manta Ray, well, Chase's first instinct is to immediately admonish the Xiaolin monks because they just let one of the biggest bad guys out of his prison cell. And while the Xiaolin monks think, well, whatever, another end of the world scenario, Chase just admonishes them and says, no, it's far worse than that before he leaves them. And, well, unfortunately, that's where the episode ends. So, yeah, what are my thoughts on this episode? Well, it's alright. I will say this, it's alright. I probably would give it higher points, but unfortunately there is one little problem with the episode. And that is, unfortunately, Hannibal Roy Bean. Now, I'm not saying initial first impressions of him are bad, but they're not good either. It's a mixed bag for me. The thing is, like I said a few weeks back when I said that the next big bad of the series was going to be kind of a mixed bag of stuff for certain fans, well, I can see why. The thing is, when we first initially meet Hannibal Roy Bean, I honestly thought it was a cool introduction. We see an actual, honest-to-goodness prison in the yin-yang world. We go inside, see the place all topsy-turvy, and then we get this light impression of Hannibal as we see what these dark red eyes looking through this screen at Jack, and yet we hear this almost friendly, cordial southern voice just talk to Jack, saying that he's happy to meet someone like Jack, and saying that if he overcomes his weakness, he could probably be the pinnacle of evil doing, which I think is cool. And then you see this dark demonic figure sitting in the middle of a glass cell before spitting out. And we see that in reality, this evil figure is this tiny little bean. And we're still given the impression that this tiny little bean is more than meets the eye, as he still has the same cordial drawl. He still has this evil look in his eye, and I'll give credit where it's due. The crooked teeth combined with the weird eyes and the little vestigial arms, it still honestly makes him a little creepy, because you're like, this guy is just a little bean, and yet he had to be locked up in such a secure prison. It still makes you wonder what's going on, and we still see a hint of venom to him, as Jack, being Jack, is too dumb to realize that Hannibal Hannibal wants him to let him out of his cell, and so he starts driving the point home, just telling Jack, "Let me out of here." And it creates a good, strong impression. On top of that, when we learn that Hannibal Roy Bean was the one that initially corrupted Chase Young, it does add an extra layer to him, as he's basically the evil behind the evil. Now, we know Chase Young is a villain. Chase Young is one of the biggest bads the Xiaolin monks have ever faced. He's a chess master. He literally took over the world at the end of the last season. He played his cards right, and it came out all on top for him. So to learn that this little guy was the one that helped create such a master of villainy, it gives him a much bigger impression. The problem is that, unfortunately, in practice, Hannibal Roy Bean doesn't feel like he has a lot of the gumption to actually make him one of the big bads. In fact, I dare say he's a little too jokey. When we first met Chase Young, we immediately sensed that he meant business the instant he appeared on screen. This was a guy that clearly just oozed evil intent, and who did not see any challenge to, and did not see any opposition. He didn't really feel any fear for any opposition, and that was mostly because he had the skill to back up this attitude. He looked down on other people, but he also knew when to give respect, but every hint of respect he gave was laced with venom. This guy was a guy who knew he was better than you, but never openly flaunted it. And honestly, that made him a little bit more intimidating. And then when you actually saw him in practice, you did see that he wasn't someone you wanted to fuck with. He didn't joke around. He didn't play games with anybody. He got right to business, and it made you afraid of him. And I think worked sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. That worked to Chase Young's advantage. But now you have Hannibal Roy Bean, and while initial first impressions of him when he's trapped in his cell are good, after he gets out of the cell, I hate to say it, he kind of sounds like an average villain of the week. Now, I'll give credit where it's due. They do showcase that he's smart, and the fact that he was able to turn Chase, it's an immediate hint towards what kind of villainy he's used to. Because the thing is, Hannibal Roy Bean's ultimate goal as a villain is subterfuge. I'll get more into it as we go on into the series, but Hannibal's way of trying to, sow the seeds of evil is to literally sow the seeds of evil from the soil of goodness. He pretty much just he pretty much just finds people that are good and just, and manages to corrupt them from the inside. It's what he did with Chase, and ultimately, and we kind of even see that in play when the Xiaolin monks end up freeing him from his prison. How he's able to get them to let him out is by pretty much just letting them fall into their own trap. They find his prison, but when they get there, they don't see Hannibal Roy Bean, they see Jack Spicer. And how Hannibal is able to make them think that he is the genuine article is by putting on a really damn good act. When the Xiaolin monks finally figure out that they let the big kahuna out, he's able to turn the tide of battle in his favor by immediately trying to blend in with the crowd, by shapeshifting first into Omi and then turning into Dojo. And he's a good actor. He knows how to put on a role. Hell, when he impersonated Clay and tricked the Xiaolin monks into letting him out of the yin-yang world, you would look at him and you probably would think he was the genuine article. And you could argue that was an added effect to the Moby Morpher. And it was. But the thing about acting, it's not just looking the part, it's acting the part. You have to actually convince the people that you're talking to that you are the person that you are. And the fact that Hannibal Roy Bean was able to put on enough of a convincing act to make everyone think that he was the people he was shapeshifting into, it kind of helps showcase that he does know a bit about subterfuge and how to get under people's skin. So I'll give you that. At the very least, he does have something to him that you could easily see as a grander scope villain. The problem is that when you actually see him in practice, I hate to say it, he kind of reminds me of Wuya if Wuya wasn't beholden to other people. Which I know that you're gonna say, well, that's just Wuya anyway. But the thing is, let me put it this way. It's like if you took one of the villains of the week from Xiaolin Showdown and then made them the next big bad. And that, unfortunately, is kind of the impression I'm getting from Hannibal Bean in the first episode. As when we finally do see him free from his prison, he's quipping and he's joking, he's treating fighting like it's a game. He's not pulling out he doesn't really come across as a powerful force. He just feels like a tiny little bean that only really knows how to fight because apparently he's got some mystical voodoo behind him and he has the Moby Morpher on his side. And I'm sorry to say that also it makes him feel somewhat lesser. It kind of makes you feel like that Chase is the bigger threat, and that's kind of what I find even more amusing. At the end of the episode, Chase Young says that Hannibal Roy Bean is the worst kind of evil to plague this world, and I'm just sitting here thinking, dude, you literally split the planet in half. I kind of think you got Hannibal topped in terms of villainy. So I don't really know. Again, I don't really know how to feel about Hannibal Roy Bean initially. Again, there are strong points to his first reveal, but when you actually see him when you actually see him in action, he doesn't come across as some kind of next big evil guy. He comes across as a villain of the week who's gonna have longer lasting implications. It doesn't mean that he's initially awful. I didn't hate him when he was on screen, but it just doesn't feel like he's as big a deal as the episode wants you to think he is. So I don't know. I feel like that's the biggest flaw for me. But I can also list something else. This episode also introduces a retcon of Chase Young's backstory. Now, admittedly, when we first learned Chase Young's backstory, there was enough open about it that you could add more details if you wanted to. Like in this case, where we learned that the one who gave Chase Young the Lao Ming Lo soup was Hannibal Roy Bean. When we first heard Chase's backstory from Master Monk Guan, we didn't know who what evil force was the one that tempted Chase, so having it be that it was Hannibal Roy Bean that did it, I'm actually okay with. And again, I kind of like the idea that the thing that turned Chase into the bastard that he is was his own weakness. That he wanted to be evil. That he wanted to be evil just because he wanted to be stronger. And it wasn't that he was a bad guy, it's just that Hannibal played on his weaknesses and pushed him in the right direction for it. And I kind of like that. I do actually think that works. But it's just that what I call a question too is, he was friends with Master Monk Guan? Yeah, apparently Master Monk Guan was alive when Chase Young first became evil. I'm a little surprised by that, as apparently Chase Young is over hundreds of years old, so how old is Master Monk Guan? How is he still staying in such good shape? Why is he still alive? I don't know. I'm just honestly surprised. And if Master Monk Guan could be like this even without the Lao Ming Lo soup, why even take the Lao Ming Lo soup? Oh, okay, admittedly, the episode does kind of give enough of an explanation. Hannibal Roy Bean convinced Chase Young to take it so that he'd be the strongest. So, obviously, he didn't give up his soul for youth, he gave his soul for power. Whatever. And you could argue that Master Monk Guan didn't know the full story, so whatever. You could easily say, you could give an argument either way. My point, I don't know, it's just... Hold on one second. Sorry about that, I was helping my dog with something, and I was having trouble finding the freaking pause button. Point is, the fact that Master Monk Guan was alive that long, it just kind of raises some questions for me. Like, if he was that, why is he that old? How is he that old? And if he is that old, why is Master Dashi not around? I don't know, it just makes me scratch my head. It's not like enough to like ruin his character or anything. We'll get to that later. But it does kind of make me go, what is going on here? But so whatever. Whatever. Point is though, I will at least give credit where it's due. I like how the episode basically tries introducing Hannibal Roy Bean. And I'll get, again, kind of what I like about it is that it kind of has continuity from the last episode. I mentioned last week that the Bird of Paradise episode was pretty much just filler aside from a few things, but I think what I like about this episode, is that despite it being filler, it does have longer lasting implications. Not just with having the Xiaolin monks show off their new Wudai powers, but by having the fucking bird that Jack took apparently be this big, mystical, important bird that's apparently the personal pet of Hannibal Roy Bean. And I actually kind of like that. When we popped in to see Jack in his lab working on his stuff, when we saw the bird was there with him, I kind of like that they had that bit of continuity. So I kind of like that popped back together. So I kind of like that it turned out that this bird was such an important thing and did end up and basically wound up being the eyes and ears, so to speak, for our next big bad. So I liked that. And like I said, being pulled into the yin yang world and Jack having to basically free Hannibal Roy Bean from his prison, I did actually like that as well. As again, initial first impressions of Hannibal did make him come across as someone to be taken seriously, and I did actually like that. Mind you, again, he loses points as when he's free of it, he doesn't really feel like he's anything big or interesting, and I still think Chase Young's a much better villain. But at the very least, it was a nice beginning, and despite my opinions on Hannibal, his plan worked in the end. In fact, I dare say that by the end of the episode, the bad guy got a win. Like, this guy managed to trick everybody just to get what he wants. He got his pet in with Jack Spicer so that he could get someone inside to help him get free. He used that to his advantage to eventually trick the good guys into letting him out by being as pathetic as possible while pretending to be Jack Spicer. And likewise, he further tricked the good guys by using the Moby Morpher to impersonate Clay and thus having them literally bring him out of the yin-yang world. So by the end, in the end, our bad guy basically won. And he did it very easily. So I can honestly say that not many villains do that. I mean, okay, we got Chase Young. He played everything perfectly. But initial first impressions. But even in his first episode, he suffered a loss when he was introduced. He was trying to cook dojo into the Lao Ming Lo soup, and then he got his ass whooped by Master Monk Guan, and he had to let everybody go. So the fact that Hannibal Roy Bean's first appearance basically had him net a win against the good guys rather thoroughly, I might add, I actually do like that. It is a strong way of introducing him. It's just that, again, seeing him in action does lose him a few points. So, end result, do I hate the episode? I wouldn't say that. I do like the open-endedness of it. I like that it has a bitter ending to it as there's a new evil in the world and it's the Xiaolin monk's own fault that it's free. I like that we're kind of given a sense of what Hannibal is up to. And while I will still give some crap to a few points in the episode, like again, Hannibal as a villain in action doesn't feel like as big a deal as the episode wants you to think he is. And again, the kind of sort of retcon with Chase's backstory is a bit strange in my opinion, especially in relation to Master Monk Guan, but initial first impressions are alright. It's just alright. I think what kind of helps in that regard is that Hannibal's real biggest end goal in this episode wasn't something big and evil. In fact, to my knowledge, we don't even know if he has an end game in mind. It's just that he's a new evil figure. And he's just a new evil figure in the world, and that's it. We don't really know much about him beyond what he did with Chase, so by the very least, I like his voice. No, I'm not even kidding. I love his southern drawl. I like how he kind of acts all nice and cordial. So, I do dig that, although it does clash when he kind of goes over the top and hammy, so what can you do? So, I don't know. Point is, I think the episode is alright for what it is. It's not great, but as the introduction of the next big bad, it does the job. It just does the job. It's not a great episode, but definitely is alright for what it is. So I guess take that for what it's worth. I don't know. So again, it's not a strong first outing for our villain, but not an awful one either. So whatever. I guess that's really all I have to say. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I'll hopefully see you next week as Omi begins trying to look into more of his own backstory. So till then, I hope you have a good Friday, and take care.